You'll get a little notification. Okay. All right. So we have a really interesting topic today. I want to thank everybody for coming out. There's a lot of you here, some newbies. So welcome to the District 7 connection. You're always welcome to come to these. But today we are going to hear from Michaela Renz-Whitmore. She is the manager of the Urban Design and Development Division for the city of Albuquerque. She is my go-to for all things planning and zoning. And I think after you hear from her today, she will be your go-to as well. Michaela, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to ask everybody to go on mute and hold their questions until the end, and then we'll do a moderated Q&A at the end. Go ahead, Michaela.
Hi, thank you, Councilor, for having me here. I'm excited that all of you do have time on a Friday mid-morning to think about the development review process. So good for you, kudos. I'm a big old planning and zoning nerd, and I love this stuff. You don't have to love it, but I do. I'll also share that I have two kiddos, 16 and going on 13. So, and they're both living with me. So that's great. Let me share my presentation. All right, hopefully you can see my slide. Great. Okay, so my job today is to kind of, for some of you, you know this inside and out, and you're probably going to be correcting me in the chat. But for the rest of you who may not have been involved in a development process, or you saw something going up and you weren't quite sure how did that happen and why didn't I hear about it? Well, I'm going to explain what you're going to hear about and what you're not going to hear about as you see changes going on around you. So I'm a planner, got to start with the plan. So the city of Albuquerque has a comprehensive plan that kind of together asks the question and answers the question, what do we want for Albuquerque? What do we want this to look like in 20 years? What kind of place should this be? And so it talks about if Albuquerque is ever going to grow, and by the way, our comp plan's not very pro-growth, it's like a growth management approach. If we're going to grow, where are the most appropriate places to grow? And since about 2003, our comprehensive plan has answered that question by saying we should grow the most in centers of activity connected by corridors that offer people a reasonable, safe way to get around, whether you're walking or biking or taking transit or driving. So that together is the centers and corridors approach to growth. The comprehensive plan also kind of says, where do we need to be really careful not to overgrow? And since 1975, one of the things that the comprehensive plan has said is, let's be really careful about our major public open space. We've spent the last 50 years building that public investment in forever protecting major public open space. And so we're going to be really careful about that. We also want to be mindful of the fabulous and distinct neighborhoods that we have in Albuquerque. And so we should also be careful not to just make one size fits all, but really recognize that Albuquerque is great because of our distinct neighborhoods. So comp plan says all that. And then the integrated development ordinance, which I'm going to be talking about for the rest of today, is really the gears that get us closer to the vision in the comprehensive plan. So our zoning code, the integrated development ordinance, are regulations. It's a legal system. For those of you who know the document, you know it's really long and really complicated. But part of the reason it's long and complicated is because it has a lot of nuance, actually, about tailored rules that we need so that Old Town never gets paved over and looks like anywhere else in Albuquerque, rules for Nob Hill and Borellis and Uptown even to make things how we want them to be going forward. So not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I will just say in general, the zoning code takes an approach that says we need to do two things at once. We need to protect the things that the comprehensive plan tells us are really important to protect because we wrote the comprehensive plan, right, together through conversation and with wisdom from our city councilors. And to do that, we have to pull development pressure away from the places where we don't necessarily want it to the places we do, places that are most appropriate to absorb that growth. And so the centers and corridors regulations in the integrated development ordinance allow more intense development than other places. They allow taller buildings than other places to try to grab some of that market pressure and pull it away from our neighborhoods. That's the strategy. If either one doesn't work very well, if we're not protecting our special places, or if we're not allowing development where it's more appropriate, then the balance gets off and our strategy kind of falls apart. So we're trying to kind of keep that balance as we make changes over time. The other thing to kind of be mindful of, folks often say, well, why doesn't every neighborhood have a special rule, right? If they're so distinct and so diverse, why not just have a bunch of rules for every single neighborhood? And the answer is, if you have one-off rules for everything, nothing gets enforced. It just becomes an unwieldy system. And so we need to have rules that establish that high quality bar for development so that we don't have to have one-off rules for absolutely everything. Every area should have high quality development. The special rules for Old Town, let's say, or for development near major public open space, let's say, are really important. But if everything's a one-off rule, then nothing really is protected. So again, not going to spend too much time on this, but just to let you know, there is an order that we apply the very complex rules in the zoning code. So anything that does have a special rule, like an overlay zone or a small area, like a regulation just applying to a small area, they get applied first. And then we apply the rules that are special for our centers and corridors. Those are both incentives and extra regulations to enforce, let's say, walkability, or to make sure that our buildings kind of have high pedestrian interest for folks walking by or riding their bike by, not just driving by at 50 miles an hour. And then very last, the rules that are just about a zone district, those get applied at the very end of this process. So we could make it a lot simpler, the zoning system a lot simpler if it was one size fits all. But I think we've made the choice that protecting our distinct areas is worth a little bit of complexity. And so here's how that works for us. Okay, the rest of the presentation is really about process. So there's a strategy around the process as well. The integrated development ordinance basically says the time to have a lot of community input and dialogue is as we're deciding what the rules should be. I'm pausing on purpose. Once we decide what those rules are, development that meets the rules should get approved. So some of you asked the question, well, why didn't I hear about this? Why didn't I hear about that? And the answer is because they met all the rules. They weren't asking for an exception. And the integrated development ordinance, it gets updated on a regular cycle. And so that's our opportunity to really look at those rules and say, are they working? If they're not working, how should they be adjusted? And have those conversations. So we've committed as a city to keeping our integrated development ordinance updated, and then we have to let it do what it does. And if it's not working, your counselors can introduce changes that make it work better for us. So if someone can't meet the rules, they're trying to do something that's more innovative than we anticipated when we established the rules, or they sure don't like those rules and they'd sure like to break them, then they're opting into a lot more public process, discretionary decisions that you are going to be notified about if you're part of a neighborhood association. There will be a sign on the property for you to notice what they're asking to do, which rules they're asking to break, and there's a process that you can get involved. So we're updating the zoning code right now. Not going to be talking about those proposed changes, but I do want to encourage you, if you haven't spent time looking at them, or you just want kind of an overview of what kinds of changes are being proposed, planning staff is holding multiple sessions to kind of go through those changes with you and let you ask questions before we go to a hearing in front of the environmental planning committee. That hearing before the EPC is at the end of this month. It's already October. Can you believe it? So come to these sessions. Even if you can't come to the sessions, we'll record them. We'll put them on the project webpage, which you have in front of you here. And even if you can't do that and you still have questions, you can always email us at abc2z@cabq.gov. So let's just look at. I know this is a really complicated thing, and I promise I'm not going to read all these words on this slide. But what you're looking at is a summary of all the different applications that someone might need to do a development in the city of Albuquerque, and what are the requirements? What's the process that that application has to go through? So you'll notice that there are three types of applications, and they very much influence what you'd hear about and what you wouldn't. So the green band of applications are administrative decisions. That means planning staff is reviewing and deciding those applications, things like a sign permit or a site plan for something that meets all the rules. For that, the way this table works, so the applications are the rows, and the first set of columns are meetings that are required either before or that can be requested after somebody applies. The next set of columns are public notice that's required when they submit the application or something that city does after, and I'll go over that in more detail here in a second. The next set of columns are who's going to make the decision. And I know these are lots of alphabet soup letters, but if you look at the top of the table, and this is true of all the tables in the zoning code, you can see the acronyms that we're using. They may not mean anything to you yet, but if you want to know more, you can click on the link in the document. All of these specific procedures are a hyperlink, and click it, and it'll take you to the section where you can actually read more and read who is the planning commission and all that good stuff. So all the decisions that are made by staff do require some kind of emailed notice to a neighborhood association. They're all, for the most part, posted on the city's website. But because staff's just deciding and the rules are the rules, and if you break them, then you opt into a different process, there isn't a whole lot of public discussion of these applications. The next set of applications are decisions that do require a public hearing, which means there's lots more notice required for these applications, and there's a hearing where the public can come and give testimony or send in comments beforehand. Important to note, these are still applications that are decided just on the rules that apply. So it's not yet a discretionary decision that we're deciding what the rules should be. These are really things that are just saying, does it meet, does it not meet? The last set of applications are things where we're really deciding what the rules should be for that development on that particular property, or changing the set of rules because it's a zone change request. So for that last category of decisions, there's lots of public notice required. There is a public hearing where you can get involved and testify. And really important, those rules are decided case by case. So that is a discretionary decision where your opinion has some weight and can shift what rules apply to that property in the future. For those decisions, not only are our decision makers looking at the zoning code in the integrated development ordinance, they're also looking at the comprehensive plan, which is the policy that says what should the rules be, right? So I'm going to skip us ahead just in the interest of time. So let's look at, this is a zoom in of a few of the decisions that require a public hearing. And you can see these are the kinds of notice that might be required. So if you're ever wondering, like, why didn't I get an email? You can check this table and see if that particular application would have required you to get an email or not. And if not, that's grounds for appeal, and that decision can be remanded to be decided again. So let's talk about public notice. So email notice is something that goes to the neighborhood association representative. So each neighborhood association has to register with the Oh my gosh, Office of Neighborhood Coordination. That was out of my head for a second. Not out of your head, I'm sure, but every year neighborhood associations register and tell the city who are the representatives that require notice. And here's where the Integrated Development Ordinance and the Neighborhood Association Recognition Ordinance come together. The second kind of notice is mailed notice. Mailed notice goes to property owners within 100 feet of the site where any development's happening. Posted sign is a posted sign. Published notice is something the city does. We put that in the Albuquerque Journal. I keep wondering when published notice will move away from a printed document, but we're still, some people still haunt the legal ads, and that's awesome. Good. You must have like magnifying glasses. Um, and then there's a requirement to post things on the web. And just want to really encourage people to start using and start loving the ABQ plan case tracking, because that's where you can find the application materials. You can find dates for hearings and all kinds of other good things. So I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So these are all the ways that you might find out about that development before you actually see it built. Notice that there's types of notice that happen before somebody can even apply for whatever it is, and then there are things that happen after someone applies. So just zooming in a little bit with ABQ Plan, there's a map where you can sign up for alerts for anything that happens within a certain distance. And be careful, you can sign up for individual types of applications that you care about, or you can say, I want to know everything, and get ready for lots of email. But that's a pretty fun thing. You can also go to the calendar. If you see up here on the top right, there's kind of a tab for the calendar. And the calendar, oh, we're talking about the map first. Sorry. Here's the map. You can, here's the button to create an alert. Here's all the different types of applications and reviews that are happening through the planning department, and even the environmental health department is using the same system. So just know that you don't have to turn all these on. If you only want to know about variances, you can go in here under plan and only see variances, or you can turn them all on and see where absolutely everything's happening on the map. As you zoom in to one of these numbers, you're going to see more information. And when you click on it, you actually get the case number and a link to take you to the case materials, which is so great. So once you click, you're actually going to come in here, and this is the application. So you can see all the attachments that somebody has given the city to review. You can see under the summary thing, there's like a workflow. You can see where we are in our process. That's helpful for things that are administratively reviewed. You can see kind of where's the city on this administrative review. If it is something that goes to a hearing, you would be using these documents to build your comments, whether you're going to send them in by writing or give them at the hearing. So let's say that we were interested in variances. Variances go to the zoning hearing examiner, which is the ZHE. You can go and comment by going to the planning webpage, finding the ZHE, and then there's a link for a public comment portal. You can also, of course, always just send an email to city staff. We'll take it, but this keeps us nice and organized, and we don't miss things in our inbox if you submit it through the portal. On the same web page is a link to that calendar that I'm going to show you here in a second that's on ABQ Plan, a link to the map where you can see things, and also, oops, sorry, ooh, apologies, let me get us back to where we were. Yes, here's a screenshot of that comment portal, which again gives you information about when's the hearing, takes you back to the page, says, hey, if you can't make this work, just email us, that kind of information, and a link to the calendar. So this is what the calendar looks like in ABQ Plan. So you can, again, when you go to ABQ Plan, you click on the calendar tab up here on the right. You can go to the different months, you can see the different hearings, and when you click on each one, it gives you that case summary and a link to the case itself, which takes you back again to those application materials for you to review. All right, so let's say now we're still interested in that variance that's happening near you. That means someone says, I can't meet the rules, I need to ask for an exception. You've gotten notice of it because you're an email. You got an email as a neighborhood association rep, or your neighborhood association rep passed it on to you and you want to make a comment. You've gone and you reviewed all the case materials, and now you're like, but what kind of comment is going to be important? How are they even making this decision? In the integrated development ordinance, under the specific procedure for variance, you're going to click on 660. You can look and see what is the criteria for the decision maker, and your comments should speak to it. Because if the applicant can't justify that they meet these decision criteria, they shouldn't get an approval. And if you don't think they should get an approval, your job is to point out how they are not meeting this decision criteria. Just saying you don't like it or you're worried about it, or, please say no, is not as persuasive as actually doing a great job of looking at the decision criteria and saying, I think because there's going to be traffic, it means it's going to be contrary to public health, safety, and welfare. So just a little encouragement to really spend some time looking at that decision criteria as you engage in the process. So zooming out a little bit, I think the type of applications that most of you probably care about, maybe variances for some of you geeks out there, but I think most of the development that happens is really site plans. So a site plan is happening when someone's proposing to kind of either build something new or turn an existing building into something new. Um, these are mostly, the vast majority of them are going to be site plan administrative, meaning planning staff is going to be making that decision and making sure that that proposal meets all the rules in the IDO. If it doesn't, we force them to go get a variance or go through more public process. We have two teams in the planning department that review these types of applications. And so the development facilitation team does kind of the bigger kinds of site plans that require more infrastructure coordination because it's our engineering group. So these are development on lots over 5 acres, multifamily with more than 50 units, any non-residential development that has more than 50,000 square feet. That's going to be the development facilitation team. Everything smaller than that is going to be reviewed by our zoning staff. So we've got 2 different teams reviewing 2 different applications. And then the third type of site plan goes to the Environmental Planning Commission because it's either 5 acres next to major public open space. And again, because of our comp plan, we say, let's be careful. Let's be really, really careful about that. Let's send it to the Planning Commission to think through mitigating all of the potential impacts of that development next to major public open space. Or it's zoned a type of zone district that also says, let's be really, really careful and think about this case by case. Those are our, I know I didn't put what they all stand for, but I'm saying it out loud right now. Non-residential parks and open space, non-residential sensitive use, or planned development, which you can ask me questions, but like, let it wash over you. These are the zone districts that we say, let's think about it case by case, site by site. A couple other reasons why you might get kicked to the Planning Commission, but those are kind of the biggies. So just looking at the difference between site plan admin and site plan EPC, note that site plan admin still requires an email to the neighborhood association. And the posted and still requires a posted sign with some exceptions, and you can read the notes about what those are. The site plan EPC, because it's more discretionary, has lots more public notice, okay? So it's not that you're not getting any notice of the site plan. There's still going to be a sign on the property, or if you're a neighborhood association, you get that email, but definitely a lot more notice required when it's going to go to a public hearing and you have the opportunity to weigh in. Let's talk about facilitated meetings real fast. So there's a column under meetings in table 611 that says these are the types of decision that if it's a pretty big project, you as a neighborhood association or you as a member of the public can request a facilitated meeting with the proposed or with the applicant. So the whoever's, doing something. It's not always a developer. Sometimes it's a neighbor who just wants to do something in the neighborhood. When you do that facilitated meeting request, it triggers a delay it can trigger a delay in the review process. So not every decision allows you to have a facilitated meeting that kind of stops things in their track. But the bigger decisions, that is something that's shown in table 611, and you can check for that. When you ask for a facilitated meeting, we have the city legal has a dispute resolution office, which is totally cool. We're one of the few cities that has that. And they are the ones who actually schedule that facilitation and hold that session and come up with a report afterward that summarizes kind of the discussion that was had and the issues and the perspectives. And the parties that were there can correct it if it's not right. And then that facilitated report goes to the decision maker to be part of that decision-making process. So here's the types of things that require that that you can opt in to ask for a facilitated meeting. I will just caution folks that the more we slow down development, the more things don't get built, which may be good, may be bad. Any slowdown in the development process means somebody's having to spend money on financing while all of that's happening. And the more that happens and there's kind of friction in our system, the more the development community kind of advocates for removing these types of allowances. So I'll just say to you, please use this judiciously for the projects that really you need to know more and you want to kind of have a negotiated discussion offline with that developer. Okay. Appeals. This is my last big thing, and then I'll stop talking. So let's say all of that happens, you've given your comments, the decision maker made a decision that you do not think is wise. You have to submit your appeal, and there is a fee. You have to submit your appeal within 15 days, and you really only have three reasons why an appeal would be successful. Either the decision maker really messed up, they acted badly, right? Something terrible happened with bias and whatever. There just wasn't enough evidence in the record to support the decision, or they missed something and you know what it is and you can point it out. That's how you kind of get an approval for an appeal. Neighborhood associations within 660 feet automatically can appeal a decision if they submit a petition, and we can get into the details of that. Neighborhood associations don't have to do the petition if they can show that they're being harmed. So if you appeal as we are being harmed, then you just have to meet all of the ways that you're being harmed and point out how the appeal, how the decision-making body erred. Kind of lots of process, but the bottom line is all of those appeals ultimately go to city council. So city council is ultimately deciding whether that lower decision maker erred or not. Appeals that get finalized at the city, so the city council has made a decision. If an appeal is going to go on, it's got to go into district court, which is a whole other animal, and I can't really answer a lot of questions about that because it's not my baby. Okay, that is what I had to say to you. But now you've seen all these rules, and I want to say again, we change the rules every 2 years. So now's the time, get involved, come to our sessions, ask questions, and now I want to hear from you. I see we have lots of questions ready for us.
Thank you, Michaela. So I'm going to ask folks if you want to ask a question to raise your hand, which is, if you don't know how to do that, it's under the react button at the bottom. If you click on that and then click on raise hand, I'll call you in the order that you got the hands up. But I want to first say, thank you, Michaela. I think I say this every time we have a city staffer on one of these, but we just have the best staff, and the most knowledgeable and professional, and we're really glad that she was able to give us an hour here. Let's go to Alex for the first question.
Thank you. Michaela, you rock. I just want to ask, the communication goes out 100 feet within a project, is that correct?
So the mailed notice is for property owners within 100 feet. The email notice is for neighborhood associations within 660 feet.
Okay, but to petition, you have to have a majority of people within 660 feet. To me, it seems like you should also be mailing everybody within 660 feet of the project in order to make sure that everybody gets a chance to respond to it. If you're, doing a majority of people within 660 feet, they should be informed, shouldn't they?
Alex, that sounds like you're making a comment, not a question.
I raised my voice.
I will just say that in general, the city of Albuquerque, for whatever historic reason, has given a lot more process deference to neighborhood associations than almost anybody else that I know of. So our neighborhood associations getting notice out to 660 feet is highly unusual. And the neighborhood association recognition ordinance is asking neighborhood associations to actually represent and communicate with their membership. And so I'm not advocating for or against, I'm saying the narrow asks our neighborhood associations to do some of that communication and to represent people. And so somewhere between the 100 that get mailed notice and the 660 that the neighborhood association is responsible for communicating with is how you'd get that petition signed.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to Eleanor.
Are there, suppose a developer and neighbors agree on a condition and then not oppose the variance, and the developer doesn't follow that agreement, are there any things the neighbors can do, or
So Eleanor, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So you're in this scenario, the neighbor has asked for a facilitated meeting. The developer, is that right?
There
Or
may
just negotiated
there may or
offline?
may not be a facilitated,
Okay.
but there may be a meeting
Okay.
between the developer and, say, consensus planning or whoever's representing them, and they agree not to go to 2 stories, and then and then the developer doesn't go to 2 stories, and the neighbors say, well, I'll grant you your variance on the boundary line, but then the developer goes to 2 stories. Is there any mechanism to resolve that?
Short answer is not within the integrated development ordinance. You could still sue them under like civil code, and if you had documentation of what was discussed and what was agreed to, that would certainly help. But the city's rules are the IDO, and if that, if they met the variance criteria and they were granted the variance, then the city can't just say, well, that you already told the neighbors you weren't going to do this.
So in the ZHE meeting, you should ask the ZHE to put that as one of the conditions of granting the variance. Can they do that?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I
So-
think it could be a finding that, that the applicant has has requested this variance with the understanding that they can't go to 2 stories. That would help, Eleanor.
Okay, thank you. And
Yeah,
great presentation. I've
Thank you.
been to a lot of these and I learned things today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eleanor. I will just say, and Michaela, correct me if I'm wrong, but that finding is important. It doesn't mean that you have remedies within the IDO, but it does help for legal action. And we had that happen on one here. So like making sure that anything that you agree to is in a finding in the case is a good idea. All right, let's go to Peggy. Peggy, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was most helpful. I know some of these sound real good and I intend to go, but I don't quite ever make them. So this was important because it did talk about notification. I guess I have a few questions, but I'll at least ask one. You said that if if a neighborhood association can show that they're being harmed, then no petition is required. And in order to show harm, would you address those 3 criteria for appeal?
Yes, that is a detailed question that I want to have in front of me. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to share my screen again for a second. Just so happens I have the IDO open.
Michaela, I'm pretty sure you have the IDO open every moment of every day.
It was funny. I was on one meeting one time and it was really important that we have like a quick answer for something. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have my IDO open. It was so weird. Sorry, I'm not finding, I'm in the appeals section. Parents of record, procedure. Hold on, we're getting there. Council, Luho, criteria for decision. Okay. Where'd my share button go? There it is. Okay, it's going to be little, but I'll zoom in. Actually, this isn't really the section I want. So it's 2 things, Peggy. Your question implicates 2 different sections. As with all things in planning, the answer is it depends, right? So the first is the criteria for decision on the appeal itself are these 3 things. So fraud, evidence, some error, like the decision maker missed something. But your question is actually about what shows harm. So here is the section called Who May Appeal? And your question is a question of who has standing to appeal. And one of the things that anybody can appeal if they can demonstrate that his, her, its property rights or other legal rights have been specially and adversely affected by the decision. Ooh, typo, got to fix that. But in no circumstances shall a person's use of public lands constitute standing. Nothing in the section shall be, but tribes, like, you're fine. Appeal, it's fine. So it's that specially and adversely affected by the decision, which has some legal backing to it. That's a phrase, that's a legal phrase. But it's up to you to kind of show what legal right that you have for your property has been impacted. And so neighborhood associations who are appealing under this harm category have to show how is the neighborhood association harmed. Otherwise, and it's a high bar, by the way. If the neighborhood association can't really show harm on that level, then they can appeal based on proximity, which then requires the petition, Peggy.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
Sure.
folks, we have 4 hands up and we have 4 minutes left. So I'm gonna call on you. Please try to make your question short, and then Michaela, please try to make your answer short. I know it's hard to do in your world, but let's try. Patricia.
Thank you, Councilor. This is just a point expounding on Eleanor's question, which happened recently with a zone map amendment at Golden University. The developer promised to have some concessions to the neighborhood. However, a zone map amendment stays with the land. So that developer could now sell his property to someone else who could comply with the new zoning and ignore whatever was put in the original findings. So I just wanted to make that point that a variance or a zone map amendment stays with the property.
Yes, that's a
thank
really
you.
important point. Can I say one other thing?
Quick.
The alternative dispute resolution office can be used even if you don't request a facilitated meeting. So Patricia, in that circumstance, if I were the person who got an agreement from the developer and they later backed out, I would be using that alternative land dispute resolution office to have a meeting.
Okay, let's go to Meredith real quick.
I just wondered if there is any part of the process for plan approval, Michaela. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to thank you for this great presentation. But what about protection of solar access? Is there any routine checkbox for, does this project protect solar access rights?
So sometimes there are solar access regulations built in for residential zone districts. So development that's happening inside of a residential zone district does have to meet those solar access protections. Otherwise, it's based on the building heights that are allowed by zone district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Meredith, real quickly, there's also some solar provisions in the energy building codes. So not Michaela, not the IDO, but
Building code.
those are handled in 2 different places. Willa.
Thank you. Michaela, thanks for the presentation. And if there's time to do a part 2, I would certainly attend. My question is, I'd like to hear about how IDO amendments are created, who writes them, and what does it mean when a city councilor sponsors them? Thanks.
Yeah. So great and relevant question. So the integrated development ordinance, let me step backwards. The city council is the city of Albuquerque's planning and land use body, decision-making body. So not the administration, city council. So the IDO is actually a city council document. The planning department has our hands and elbows and eyeballs all up in it, right? So proposed changes to the integrated development ordinance sometimes come from planning staff, sometimes come from the public, sometimes come from, anybody who has a good idea, sending it in to either a councilor who then sponsors a proposed amendment, or sends it to the planning department and we vet it to see whether it's something we want to put forward. So when the IDO itself requires the planning department to gather up all those proposed changes and submit them every 2 years. So that's on the planning department. City council has reserved for itself the right to amend the IDO at any time. When the planning department sends the IDO through the process, we are required to send those changes first to the planning commission that makes a recommendation, and then it goes to city council for final decision. When the city council proposes or a councilor proposes a change, they have a choice to send it to the planning commission, or they can just send it to themselves for city council to decide. So depends, planning answer.
Thank you. And
Mhm.
then it is 11:01, but I do want to give at least Julie, because she hasn't gotten a chance to ask one question yet. So quickly, Julie.
Thank you, Michaela. Open space, does city property that's owned near open space have the same requirements for the protections?
Yes, it does, Julie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Peggy, we're gonna have to close it out. We are over time. But I think we learned a lot. Thank you all for showing up and listening. Thank you, Michaela, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. And we will see you next month. And for those of you that are new, if you are not signed up for the District 7 listserv, please go onto the website. It's the very first thing on the top of my website. And then you'll get notifications of all of these, and you'll also receive the monthly newsletter. See you next time. Bye-bye.